You understand? Like the Williamsburg police is targeting blacks and Hispanics, you understand? Like the Williamsburg police is targeting blacks and Hispanics, you understand? Like if you understand? Like the Williamsburg police is targeting blacks and Hispanics, you understand? Like if no one knows about Williamsburg, Williamsburg is the country. You understand? Like it's a real country, maybe if I'm saying it's rural type area. Like it's not like a city type built area. It's not like Norfolk. It's not like it's not like your Portsmouth or your Newport News, like a city type area. Virginia, Williamsburg is like the sticks. It's like a real woody and country area, and its majority, that's Williamsburg is where white people are. What the so-called white man, our oppressor. Like Williamsburg is a real racist city, a very not city but a very racist town. If you're not from Virginia, Williamsburg, you don't want to be caught in Williamsburg. If you're so-called black, Hispanic, and Native American, you do not want to be caught in Williamsburg. Like Williamsburg, you know, they fly their flag, their Confederate flag, or that rebel flag that y'all call whatever it is. Like they fly it openly as if it's the American flag. Not saying there's a difference between the two, but I'm just letting you know that's how Williamsburg is. It's a very racist area, very prejudiced. And Williamsburg is known for hating blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. Just like how America is known to hating so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. And really, this shouldn't be a shock to us that Williamsburg's police department is targeting so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. It really shouldn't be a shock because it's happening all around America. Like the incidents that happened in Minneapolis with George Floyd. That's happening in the state of Virginia, just like it's happening in the state of Maryland. It's happening in the state of New Jersey, the state of New York and Delaware. Like police brutality in the police departments of America, attacking and targeting so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. You understand? It's happening all over America. It's happening everywhere, and there's really no change because it's in the heart of America to hate so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. It's in the heart to murder and kill and steal and just completely destroy so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. It's in the heart of America. So Williamsburg police has been targeting blacks and Latinos, and it's coming from Newport News and Hampton. So if you are black, Hispanic, or Native American, and you live in Newport News and Hampton, the Williamsburg Police Department is telling you not to be and come into their city. What does that sound like to you? What does it sound like when Williamsburg Police Department, a damn near all white town, is telling other black people that are coming from a majority black town not to come into their town or not to come into their city, or we're going to arrest you any means necessary? That sounds like Jim Crow. That sounds like, you know, what your grandmothers and your grandfathers went through. You understand? Like the Bible talks about there's nothing new under the sun, right? Listen, this entire time, the so-called white man, our oppressor, has never changed his views against us. It just got more political and more systematic. You understand? It's not as open as it used to be, but it's still there. And the Williamsburg Police Department is showing us that, you know, our oppressor still hates us, still wants to murder us, still wants to lock us up and give us 20 years to life without parole, and just continue to destroy us. You understand? Like that's what the Williamsburg Police Department is trying to show so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, right? So let's get Lamentations chapter 4, verse 18. Lamentations chapter 4, verse 18. It says, they hunt our steps. Like, what does it mean to hunt our steps? Like, let's focus on the word to hunt. Like, what does it mean to hunt? Has anyone ever went hunting before? If you ever go hunting, there's something that you need in order to hunt. There's rules to hunting. There's ways to hunt. You have the hunter, then you have your prey. And in order to get your prey, you have to bait it in. You have to have something called bait. You understand? And that's what America gives so-called blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans right? The police department gives black people bait in order to arrest them. Like the police department gives blacks and Latinos bait in order to lock them up and give them a court date by next week and lock them up and throw them in jail and throw them in prison and give them 20 years to life without parole. Give you about 15 to 30 years to never see your mother again, to never see your father, your son, or your daughter ever again. Like these, the Williamsburg Police Department gives you these baits, right? And what are these baits that the police department gives you? They give you drugs. They give you, they put, you know, the America put child support on our brothers. Like these are the baits. Certain things, right? Like drugs is a big bait in the Black, Hispanic, and Native American community. Like that's the biggest bait that the so-called white man, our oppressor, has pushed into the Black, Hispanic, and Native American community. We would never have cigarettes if it wasn't for the white man. Like we smoke Newports all the time. We would never have Newports if it wasn't for our oppressor in America. Like we would never have crack cocaine or heroin or marijuana or weed or that guns if it wasn't for the so-called white man pushing these very things in the Black, Hispanic, and Native American community. Like we would never have illegal firearms in the Black, Hispanic, and Native American community if it wasn't the so-called white man pushing that into the Black, Hispanic, and Native American community. Like these are the way the Williamsburg Police Department and the police department throughout America baits so-called Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans in to hunt us, to kill us, in order to murder us. And the Lord goes on to saying, they hunt our steps. Like the Williamsburg Police Department is hunting the steps of so-called Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans within America, within Norfolk, within Williamsburg, within Newport News and Hampton, and Virginia Beach and Chesapeake and Suffolk, in the Hamptons Road area. And it's happening within all of America. And when we were reading, and when I was reading this topic and actually studying it and actually breaking it down, right? This is what the chief police goes on to say. Like Sean Don, he's the chief police, right? And he goes on to say, the article goes on to say, right? This takes place in the year of 2019, and they're just talking about it in 2020 because of what? Because of what happened to George Floyd. Now they want to discuss the conditions of black people. All of a sudden, there's a whole bunch of riots and a whole bunch of protesting, a whole bunch of marching, and things are not, and you know, we're not loving our oppressor the way we used to love him. Now they want to look into ways of how to fix and help the Black, Hispanic, and Native American community by looking into the incarceration rates, right? So allow us to understand that very fact of what's going on. So the article goes on to say, out of 408 arrests, now this takes place in 2019, out of 408 arrests, 87 Williamsburg residents were arrested, right? So out of 408 arrests, 87 residents of Williamsburg had been arrested. So we know right off the rip on what the chief police, right, Sean Don, right, has been saying is they have arrested 408 people, but 87 of those people were residents of Williamsburg. Now, here's the kicker, right? And this is crazy. 87 were arrested that were residents of Williamsburg, right? Chief Don also goes on to say that 87 black people were arrested in Williamsburg. Now let's take that. Now let that sink in. He just said there were 87 residents, right? There were 87 arrests, right? Out of the 408, 87 of them were residents of Williamsburg. And he also goes on to say, and I'm gonna re-say it so we understand the impact of it. He also goes on to say 87 black Williamsburg residents were also arrested. What does that mean? Those 87 residents were all black. So what were the other 408 arrests? Those other 408 out of the other ones, out of the 408, they came from other cities. They come from other areas. And guess what? They were also black. The majority of the arrests in Williamsburg were blacks and Latinos. Were blacks, Latinos, and Hispanics and Native Americans, you understand? Like, that was the majority of the arrest in Williamsburg. And that's why the Lord says in verse 18 in Lamentations chapter 4, they hunt our steps. Like, this is what it means to hunt our steps. The Lord also goes on to say that we cannot go in our streets. Like, we live in Williamsburg. We are residents of Williamsburg. In 87 arrests of the Williamsburg, right? The residents of Williamsburg were black. And 87 residents of Williamsburg were arrested. So Williamsburg Police Department arrested 87 residents of Williamsburg. And all 87 of them were black people. Were blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. Now that's real, and that's real impactful. That's real heavy, because that's all who they were targeting. That's all who they were arresting. They weren't arresting Billy. They weren't arresting Tyler and Skylar and Zachary. You understand? They were arresting Deshaun and Daquan and LaQuisha and Kiki. That's who they were arresting. They were arresting so-called blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans. You understand? They were arresting, you know, your Pedros and your Enriques and your Graces. You understand? And your Marys and your who else? And your Marias. You understand? Like, that's who they were arresting. That's who they were targeting in Williamsburg. They were not targeting their own nation of people, their own race of people. They were targeting blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans within Williamsburg, and also black people coming out into Williamsburg.